The alien queen's roar shattered the observation blister like crystal, a sound that wasn't sound at all, but a pressure that made the stars outside wobble. On the command deck of the dreadnought Vehemence, every species flinched, scaled, furred, chitinous, except the single human in oil-stained coveralls who kept whistling through his teeth while he tightened a brass-colored bolt with a wrench older than Earth's space age. "Who fixed my armor?" the Queen demanded again, her voice now riding a carrier wave that tasted of copper and ozone. The bulkhead monitors showed her kilometer-long body coiled in the void, obsidian plates cracked and resealed with seams of liquid mercury that still steamed. The human, call sign Mac, lifted the wrench like a toast. "That'd be me, Your Majesty. You were venting royal plasma all over low orbit. Looked impolite." 100 bridge officers waited to be atomized. Instead, the Queen laughed, a noise like tectonic plates mating. "Impudent mammal, do you know what I do to trespassers? Feed 'em to your larvae?" Yeah, I read the brochure. Mac pocketed the wrench, wiped his hands on a rag that had once been an enemy flag, and started walking toward the airlock. Thing is, those cracks were propagating along shear lines I'd seen in Type 4 neutronium. Left untreated, you'd have come apart next time you fired your spinal lance. So technically, I saved your kids from orphanhood. You're welcome. The Queen's bioluminescent eyes narrowed. "No human has touched royal chitin since the Siege of Terra. Explain the alloy you used." "Trade secret, but I'll give you a hint. It's 90% irony and 10% don't ask." The lock cycled open on the hard vacuum that should have flash frozen him. Instead, he stepped onto an invisible membrane the Queen extruded, an honor walkway of solidified pheromone that smelled of wrath and curiosity. Behind him, the bridge crew watched, certain they were witnessing the first human-flavored appetizer in history. Mac kept walking. Every 30 meters, a different alien species tried to intercept. Honor guard, assassin, theologian, each repelled by the Queen's low growl, "Mine." Halfway to the royal wound, he stopped, knelt, and rapped a knuckle against a fresh seam. The mercury rippled, recognizing him. "See that lattice? Borrow the idea from Japanese kintsugi, gold joined in broken pottery. Only I use particles of your own molten crest, so your body won't reject it. Should flex with your next molt, if you ever forgive yourself for growing." The Queen's massive head lowered until one eye, an iris of swirling galaxies, filled his horizon. "You presume I value aesthetics over vengeance. Nah, I presume you value survival, and right now, the same microfracture pattern spreading through your fleet's flagship. One shot from Terran railguns, and your entire armada shatters like sugar glass." He unscrewed the flask, took a sip, and offered it upward. The Queen's tongue, ribboned with serrated light, snaked out, sampled the vapor. "Bourbon, aged in white oak barrels charred by lightning fires. We call it storm-kissed. Good for what ails you." The Queen inhaled the rest, glass and all, then spoke around the aftertaste. "You claim you can inoculate my ships against Terran weaponry?" "Already started." Mac tapped the wrist pad sewn into his sleeve. Across the system, maintenance drones, retrofitted cargo tugs piloted by retired Terran mechanics began spraying identical mercury seams on every hull. "Your fleet thinks it's being repaired by slave nanites. Truth is, every weld contains a dormant kill switch, keyed to my heartbeat. I die, the alloy sublimates to dust. You become orbital confetti." Silence stretched until the stars themselves seemed to listen. Then the Queen laughed again, softer, almost fond. "A single mammal holds the largest empire in the galaxy hostage with sentiment and solder. What do you demand?" Max shrugged. "Safe passage home for every human POW, and a beer. This flask is empty." The Queen's eyes sparkled. "Agreed, if you remain as royal armorer. You will live aboard Vehemence, teach my larvae your storm-kissing secrets, and never return to Terra." Mac considered the void beneath his feet, then the distant blue marble barely visible in Sol's glare. "Counter-offer," he said. "I stay one revolution of your capital world, roughly 3 Earth years. You release every prisoner, now, no conditions. When the term's up, I'll walk free, you keep the tech. Refuse, and I scram the weld codes. Your empire pops like bubble wrap." Around them, the queen's children stirred in their egg sacs, luminous veins pulsing in patterns that translated to, "Mother, let us taste the clever monkey." The queen's answer was to curl her pheromone walkway until it became a spiral leading into the wound itself. "Enter, mechanic. We will negotiate inside my heart chamber where no comm signal can betray you. If your courage matches your insolence, I may yet name you consort." Mac glanced back once, not at Terra, but at the Vehemence's bridge, where a young comms officer, human, 19, conscripted last week, pressed a palm against the viewport. He gave her the same two-finger salute pilots used on ancient aircraft carriers. She mouthed, "Come back." Then he stepped into the queen's bloodstream, where bioluminescent rivers carried memories instead of nutrients. Each pulse showed him a different future, himself crowned in chitin, earth reduced to rubble, the queen dying in his arms whispering gratitude, his own funeral attended by alien larvae wearing Terran dog tags as medals. He walked until the path ended at a chamber no larger than a garage. At its center floated a single object, his wrench, orbiting a miniature star, the queen's heart core, like a nostalgic moon. "Clever Mahal," your voice echoed from every wall. "You sealed more than armor. You sealed my fate to yours. The weld is imperfect. It carries your mitochondrial signature. Kill me, and the feedback slags your nervous system. Die, and my fleet disintegrates. We are married by metallurgy." Mac caught the drifting wrench, felt its familiar balance. "Figured you tried double-cross number 4, so I baked a little entropy into the alloy. Symbiotic, not parasitic. Your survival literally feeds off my creativity. The more I invent, the stronger you grow. The moment I stop innovating, the lattice calcifies. You become a statue at absolute zero." The queen's pulse quickened, flooding the chamber with warmth that smelled of cinnamon and supernova. "Then invent, husband. Impress me." Mac rolled up his sleeves, revealing forearms scarred by weld spatter and war. "First project," he said, spitting into his palms, "we redesign regret." He ignited a plasma torch with a flick of his thumb, the blue-white flame casting shadows that danced like memories across the chamber walls. "Regret," he said, adjusting the flame until it sang in the key of broken starships, "is just carbon waiting to be compressed into diamond." The queen's heart core pulsed, sensing the metaphor, and the chamber temperature dropped to match the frost forming on his eyelashes. Mac began slicing into his own shadow, literally, the torch carving pieces of darkness that peeled away like old paint. Each fragment contained a moment he'd failed, the rookie he'd left behind on Europa, the colony ship he couldn't patch in time, the daughter who'd grown up reading his letters instead of his face. He folded these shadow strips into origami cranes, their wings etched with serial numbers of decommissioned dreadnoughts. When he had 7, he crushed them into a singularity no larger than a bullet casing. The queen watched, fascinated, as he pressed this compressed regret against her heart core. The miniature star absorbed it, flaring ultraviolet. "Now you feel what I feel, every time I fix something that'll eventually break again." The chamber responded by growing tools, anvils of crystallized time, hammers of neutron density. Max selected one that felt like his grandfather's heartbeat and began forging. Sparks weren't sparks, but tiny galaxies dying and being reborn. He shaped a valve that would release her rage in measured doses instead of genocidal waves, a dial calibrated to the frequency of human laughter. Each strike of the hammer sent echoes backward through his timeline. He saw himself at 8, taking apart his mother's radio to find the music inside. At 22, welding hull plates while humming Johnny Cash. At 37, sealing the coffin of his best friend with the same torch he now held. The queen's biology began rewriting itself around his craftsmanship, chitin plates growing translucent windows through which constellations visible only from Earth flickered. She gasped, a sound like tectonic plates remembering they were once molten. "This hurts," she admitted, "in ways my language has no syllables for." Mac paused, wiped sweat that immediately froze into tiny comets. "Good. Pain means the weld's taking. Now let's install a pressure release before your heart learns homesickness." The queen's heart core convulsed once, twice, then settled into a rhythm that matched Mac's own pulse. Two drums separated by species and starlight, but syncopated now like jazz played in a burning club. The valve he'd forged clicked open. Instead of plasma, what escaped was sound. Every human lullaby that had ever been hummed in the dark between worlds compressed into a single chord that tasted of vanilla and ozone. The lullabies wrapped around the queen's larvae mid-metamorphosis. Their chitons softened, regrew as glassy panes showing Earth's skies. Cirrus clouds, contrails, the pale scar of an old moon landing. They saw blue for the first time and, being royalty, named the color after the mechanic who had given them eyes. Mac felt the feedback bloom in his marrow. Warm, not lethal, like swallowing sunrise. The queen's memories flooded him backward, her first hatch on a world whose sun had since gone dwarf. The genocide she ordered to avenge a single cracked egg. The centuries she spent chewing asteroids into rings because the silence reminded her of a lover devoured by a black hole. He lived every crime, every tenderness in the span of a heartbeat that took 3 Earth years to finish. When it ended, he was on his knees, but the chamber had grown taller, as if space itself had stood up to listen. Husband, the queen said, and the word no longer meant captivity, more like co-author. Your world holds, but my fleet still orbits Terra. One command and they burn your sky. Max stood, wiped his eyes, and found the rag he'd used earlier now embroidered with constellations from both their hemispheres. Then give them a new command, he answered, voice hoarse from tasting her centuries. Tell them to fire, but not plasma. Fire, music. He reached into the valve, twisted it past safe parameters. The heart core ejected a ribbon of molten notation, staff lines, clefs, sharps, flats, cooling into vinyl as it spun. The queen instinctively caught the disc between her primary mandibles, a crown of grooves. When she placed it on the dreadnought's comm array, every speaker across the armada crackled alive with Chuck Berry's guitar, the same golden record Earth had launched aboard Voyager centuries earlier. Human and alien instruments joined in, Terran banjo, Cathar glassbone, the queen's own subsonic wings. Rhythm sections collided at light speed until the difference between battle drums and dance beats collapsed into one irresistible groove. Ships that had been charging weapons found their gun ports opening instead like trumpet bells. Larvae climbed out of hatches, exoskeletons rattling syncopation. Admirals tried to scream extermination orders, but their throats produced only scat singing. The fleet formed a ring around Earth, not siege, but halo, each hull reflecting the planet's aurora like disco balls. Terrans on the night side looked up, saw hostile silhouettes morphing into constellations that spelled welcome in 100 languages, none of them spoken, yet all understood. Inside the heart chamber, the queen felt her rage sublimate into something terrifyingly tender. You have weaponized nostalgia, she accused, but her tone was wonder. No, Max said, offering her the last sip from his flask, now refilled with liquid starlight. I've just reminded both sides that every war is a duet played on broken instruments. Tonight, we tune. The queen extended a claw, sliced open her own palm, ichor mercury mixing with the bourbon. They shook hands and the weld between them flared white, sealing not just armor but treaty. A new alloy propagated outward from vehemence, rippling across every ship, impervious to hate, resonant with shared radio hits. Where it touched vacuum, it grew speakers the size of moons. The music crescendoed, Barry's riff handing off to a Beethoven symphony, then to an alien choir whose harmonies could heal hairline fractures in space-time. Earth's defense grid went quiet. Generals lowered keys instead of launching nukes. Children who had practiced duck and cover danced in streets. The queen's final order traveled on the back of a baseline. Stand down. We came to conquer, stayed to collaborate. Mac felt the kill switch dissolve inside his chest, replaced by a tiny star of his own, fusion of bourbon, regret, and alien lullabies. He knew that in 3 Earth years he would walk free. The queen knew she would let him, because empires built on rhythm can't jail the drummer. They stood together, watching the joint fleet become a mobile festival, a traveling jukebox whose playlist required 2 hearts to skip in time. When the queen spoke again, her voice carried stadium reverb. Take this crown, she said.
placing the vinyl disc on his head. It shrank to a 45 RPM halo. Rule nothing. Remix everything. Mac laughed, sound of socket wrenches falling in love, and the laugh looped out of every speaker, sampling itself until it became pure pulse. Somewhere in the loop you could still hear his first heartbeat, and hers, and every heart that ever feared the dark between stars. The music promised what no treaty could, that when the next unknown ship appeared, humanity would answer not with missiles, but with an invite to open mic night at the edge of the universe. And somewhere on the far side of that edge, a mechanic kept walking, pockets full of broken things that had learned to sing.